Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Aspire. I'm so glad you're here with Chessy and me today for what I know will be a powerful and meaningful conversation. Chessy, since today's guest is someone close to your heart, do you want to introduce her?
Absolutely. I'm so honored to welcome one of my close friends to the podcast today, someone who inspires me constantly with her strength, compassion, and dedication to helping others heal. Melanie Barton is a fierce advocate and a highly experienced forensic interviewer. She's worked with survivors of all ages and backgrounds who've experienced domestic and sexual violence, and she brings a rare combination of professional knowledge and personal insight as a survivor herself. Melanie serves on multiple boards of directors, creates and leads survivor-centered programming, and is known for her powerful public speaking, mentorship, and deep commitment to helping others find their voice. She spent her career building bridges between survivors, systems, and support networks, and today she's here to share her own story and how she's turned her pain into purpose. Welcome, Melanie. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm completely honored to be here. And these full circle moments are really, really special to me. So it's really awesome to be here with you, Chessy, a longtime friend as a survivor and advocate, and Katie, someone who I just kind of crossed paths with recently. This is a really powerful full circle moment for me. So I'm really excited to be here.
We are so happy to have you here and to get to hear from you. So to start us off, can you share a bit about your journey as a survivor? What has your path looked like from experienced sexual violence to finding your voice and becoming an advocate and the professional you are today?
Yeah, so my journey begins 2 decades ago. So 20 years ago. This year feels pretty powerful, like 2024, 2025, because it's monumental of 2 decades of healing and advocacy and turning my pain into purpose. So I'm going to bring you back to 2004, which is when I was sexually assaulted when I was 12 years old. And my story begins a little bit before that, but I didn't have memories of what happened to me when I was much younger until I was an adult. So when I tell my story, I do have to kind of go back and forth just a little bit. But the cornerstone of my journey begins when I was 12 years old. So I was sexually assaulted in my home state of New Hampshire when I was 12 years old by a 17-year-old distant relative of my best friend at the time. And that instance changed everything. I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire. I was really involved and I was very social, often coined as a social butterfly, involved in everything. And I found my way back to that. But when the sexual assault happened, it felt like everything changed in an instant. I was broken. My trust was broken. The violation embedded itself deep into my core. And I swore with my friend that we'd never tell anybody. We didn't really know what to even call what had happened. It happened outside, and there was a lot of things that happened during the situation that kind of prompted us not to tell. Things that he said and did to us that day, threats that were made, the fear that we had, and the inability to even know what had just happened to us. And so really being able to, I kind of made a promise with my best friend at the time that we wouldn't say anything. And so instantly we just started down this path of self-destruction to deal with what had just happened to us. That day, he kind of left without a trace from the park that we were at where it happened, where he sexually assaulted both of us in broad daylight. And from that point on, her and I just really struggled to grapple with what happened at 12 years old. And so from there, we went back to school, during that time for a short amount of time, and then it was summertime. And so I think it was around May. And so we went back to school like nothing happened. But then she was on vacation and she had, there was a series of events that happened, and that's her story, not mine. So I'm not going to tell that part, but she went on vacation, ended up telling her mom, and that kicked off a process for me. I had started to want help. I was really dealing with the pain in a self-destructive way. I was self-injuring, cutting myself because I wanted control over something. And my grades were starting to dip. I was really struggling in school, and people started to notice. I went from this happy kind of ham in front of the camera kind of girl, involved in all the activities. And I was starting to back away from a lot of the things that I love the most. And I was really dealing with the weight of sexual assault at 12 years old. And so I didn't have the comprehension or the ability to know what that meant at the time. I was having flashbacks of what he said and did really on a daily basis. And so the self-injury really helped me kind of put those thoughts in another space. And reliving some of the things that he said to me, like, you're not done yet, and I'm teaching you how to be in a relationship someday. And so it was this confusing realm of like, I'm in 7th grade, going into 8th grade. I have this big weight of a thing that just happened to me. I don't know, like, my body didn't feel like my own. My thoughts didn't feel like my own. My day-to-day didn't feel like my own because I was consumed with thinking about what happened, dealing with what happened for a little while, kind of in the dark without anybody other than my friend that knew what happened. And I think it was innate in me from a young girl that I just had this boldness and this voice within me. And so I really believe that is why I couldn't stay quiet for too long, even though we had kind of pinky promised that we wouldn't tell. And I was terrified to tell because of the power that this person asserted that day, but also I knew within me something had got to give. Like I was really suffering and I wanted someone to know about it. But then my friend ended up telling her mom, and that kind of kicked off a process for us. So we then interviewed by the Child Advocacy Center, which if someone doesn't know what a Child Advocacy Center is, it's a place where kids from age 2 to 17 go when there's been an allegation of child sexual abuse, severe physical abuse, witness to domestic violence, or sexual assault. And so we were brought to this place, and I was terrified because my friend and I had said we weren't going to tell anybody. She really didn't want us to tell anybody. I didn't know how to tell somebody. And so I got brought to this place and I was terrified to say anything. But when I was brought into the Child Advocacy Center, the trajectory of my journey changed forever for the better. I found my voice at the CAC. The woman who was my forensic interviewer, and forensic interviewers are the people who go to training to be able to interview kids about what happened to them in a legally sound way, so that when the case does go forward, they are able to utilize those interviews in cases, not every case, but in cases in the legal system. And so we were brought into this place for that purpose to talk about what had happened to us because my friend and her mom had reported it to the police. And then I was named as a victim in the case, that I had been assaulted that day as well. And so that day when I was brought to the CAC, I was greeted with a friendly face and a person who just had this glow about her that I couldn't figure out why, but I felt comfortable with her right away. And so we went into the interview room and I did sort of disclose what happened. I held a lot close to me because I was scared, as most 12-year-olds would be if they were going into a situation like this. But I knew that I could tell her something, even if it wasn't everything. And so I found my voice that day in a very small way, which then catapulted me like a ripple effect. I had actually, a couple weeks had gone by and I had been kind of back in that cycle of like thinking about it all the time, being consumed by it, having flashbacks. And I said, that did kind of help to talk about it even a little bit, even if I didn't give her a lot of information. And again, this is my adult self, like going back to that time, reflecting on what it was like. I do remember being like, I would like to go back and talk to her again. I wanted to see her again, which is such a 12-year-old like thought process. Like, I just want to see her again. She was really nice and really cool. And I just really liked her a lot as like a person. And I wanted to see her again. And so I went back. I requested another interview. I had told my mom I have some more to talk about. And in that interview, I did give her the details about the sexual assault that had happened. And then I walked out of the interview. I was given this bear. Actually, that first time I was given a bear. She brought me to a bookshelf filled with teddy bears, and she said that I could choose any one that I wanted. And there was this bear that had the word hope on its foot. And that my eyes locked on that bear, and I thought, in my 12-year-old brain, I thought, there is hope for me. I don't have to live this miserable, locked up life anymore by these memories, by what had happened, by what was done that I don't really understand what it is, but I know it was bad and I know it didn't feel good and that it hurt and that it was really, really awful. All the words that you could insert what a 12-year-old would be thinking about something like that happening. And so I thought, there is hope for me. I don't have to live like this anymore. And I want to get back to doing my sports and feeling like myself and like having fun with my friends without this consuming me all the time. And so I chose that bear, Hope Bear, 20 years ago, and I carry that bear with me when I speak across the country as a true testament of survivors finding their voices and that there can be hope on the journey, regardless of where you're met on the journey. Really being able to carry that hope bear with me has been powerful, that I've kept it for 20 years and use it as a symbol of hope for survivors that even if you only tell one person one time or you have a small conversation about it or just being able to find your voice in any way that works for you, that really can spark a feeling of hope within your mind, body, and soul. And so that's what the CAC did for me through this Hope Bear and through my team that was kind of assigned to me in my case. So that would include the forensic interviewer primarily at first, because she was the first and very important person on my journey where I broke my silence. And so really being able to connect with her and feel safe with her and have that kind of neutral response where obviously my family was very upset with what happened. And so not having that kind of emotionally charged response from someone, having someone just say like, I'm here to support you. You're going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. And having next steps for me was really, really powerful on my healing journey and changed my trajectory forever. And so from that point on, it was really going into 7th and 8th grade, going into high school, it was waiting for a trial. So my case went through that CAC process. And then I felt this sense of freedom, but then I felt this sense of like this weight coming back onto me now that I had this trial looming over my head. And so going through the court process, I still had what I call my dream team on my side, which was really, really crucial for me to have a team of professionals to support me and my family through the process. So that consisted of the forensic interviewer, but her role was very short. It was really just for those interviews and those couple times. I did ask to go back a third time to see her, but I didn't have anything else to say. I just wanted to see her. And so, but they allowed that. They allowed me to come back even just for that neutral setting, kind of for closure, because I had really, found my voice there. And so it was really powerful for me to be able to go back one more time just to be in the space. And then it kind of kicked to the district attorney's office in the state of New Hampshire. And I was assigned a victim advocate from the courthouse. And so I added her kind of onto my dream team as I was turning 12, 13, 14. And in addition to that, the detective on my case was incredible. He was there with me every step of the way. He was so compassionate, he just had this way about him that was super supportive. He believed me. He supported me. And it was really powerful to me that he was the one that arrested my perpetrator. I learned that years later that he was actually the one. And so he was very much part of my dream team. And I'll talk more about that dream team later, about how they continued to be that constant support in my life, even through college. They really showed up for me. And so the trial took about 2 years to go forward. And the trial ended up getting postponed 5 times in 2 years, based on kind of what was going on in the courtroom, outside of the courtroom. The defense attorney filed like 5 or 6 motions for continuance based on whatever he wanted to. And it was frustrating. I felt like my world was on hold. Like I had found the sense of freedom, that I had found my voice, but then I couldn't really move forward anymore until the trial was over, because now I'm turning like 14, and I had this thing, I'm 2 years older. I'm going through this process, but really being able to endure that process and come out the other side, now looking back on it, was really powerful. I get the question all the time, like, would you do it all over again? Like, would you have reported? Would you have, I didn't actually report myself, but would you have gone through that over again, with all you endured in those 2 years with your life on hold? And I'm like 50-50 on that question, for multiple reasons. There's a part of me that's like, yes, because during the trial, I was able to kind of find my voice again in a larger sense of the word. I was able to give a victim impact statement during the trial, and my friend just wasn't able to because of her own journey. And so it felt really powerful to me that I was able to kind of like endure those 2 years and then still get on the stand and look him in the eye and tell him the impact of what he had done. And to be able to walk out that courtroom that day and really have this kind of passion and compassion come over me of like, I want to do something with this. Like, I don't want it to stop here. Like, yes, I'm glad this trial's over, but I want to do something with this pain that I've been carrying for years now, and I want to use it for good. I don't want to stay stuck in this. And so that spark really ignited when I walked out of the courtroom that day. And so that's really the cornerstone, or the crossroads of where my personal journey and my advocate journey really begins. It was that spark. I can actually physically see it and feel it as I'm sitting here talking to you, like walking out of the courtroom doors. Like, I felt this sense of empowerment, even though it wasn't a perfect outcome. It was a really hard 2 years. The outcome was not great, but it was an outcome which not a lot of survivors experience. And so I do feel grateful that I got an outcome. And yeah, so really being able to, I don't know if we want to stop here, if you have any other questions, but I can elaborate on the advocate journey as well as we go.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Mel, for sharing about your experience at 12 and then sharing the impact that the child advocacy centers had on you. And I see a lot of parallels in both of our stories, and I think that's why we were able to connect so much when we first met, almost, or maybe 8 to 9 years ago. That experience with the legal system and how that impacts the finding of your voice, because I feel like, you explained to us multiple moments of finding your voice, and sort of the first one being at a time when you and your friend had said, we are not going to confront this or face this because you're 12 years old. I mean, how are you supposed to know at 12 years old what these things are and how to explain them? But can you explain to us just how you viewed finding your voice in the Child Advocacy Center, and then finding your voice in the trial, and then finding your voice now as an adult? How has that experience of finding your voice and telling your story shifted from the Child Advocacy Center room to the stages and podcasts and places that you go to now to share your story?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey to discover what that looks like. And just like the healing journey is not linear, neither has my sharing my story journey. It has not been linear. But I would say going from the CAC, that was really the details, right? So like, I was able to talk about the details, and they were able to get charges from those details. But as my speaking and my story has evolved, I've kind of really stepped away from the details, just because I feel like it's not necessary. And that is kind of my personal pieces that I can keep close now. And that's not what it's about for me anymore. So like, at that time, I was just longing to be able to tell someone the details about what he had done to me in detail, so I could get it out of me, and that I could find that freedom that I was longing for. As my journey went on, especially as I got into college, well, let me go back to high school. So high school, I was still kind of dealing with the aftermath of the trial, kind of settling back into life after that being everything and that being like the only thing that I could think about. And so going into eighth grade and then into high school, I really didn't want anything to do with my story. Like I wanted to play sports again and have some normalcy and like just be a ninth and 10th grade and 11th grade girl. I was still struggling with self-injury early in high school. And so I was really focusing on trying to stop doing that and to really find healing in that area with mental health support. And my school counselors were amazing from middle school and into high school. At letting me kind of walk that journey of like trying to turn away from self-injury and like having safety plans and having people I could lean on through that process. But by the time I was a junior in high school, I had really found a lot of healing in that area. I had stopped self-injuring. I made the varsity basketball team. I had been playing softball again pretty consistently and just was really, softball had been my outlet forever, even through the sexual assault. But there was a period of time where I had a hard time going to some of my games because they were at the same park that this happened at, which was near my best friend at the time's house. And so it was in my hometown. And so there was a lot of things that were like tied up into that. And so kind of in high school, I feel like I went through like a reclaiming of who I was before. Although it looked different, it was reclaiming some of those things back and just being Melanie, not being Melanie with the trial looming over her head or with the sexual assault case impacting her day to day. And so I was just trying to just be me and that's it, period. But then once I got into college, I started to really get involved with literally everything on campus, like mostly community service things. But then there was like this little world of like sexual assault awareness month stuff that was going on, different groups that were already doing it. And so I joined some of those and I was ready to really, there was a fire in me that wanted to, similar to Chessy, how you talk about like claiming your own narrative, like being able to tell your story for yourself. That because I feel like although I did kind of choose to find my voice at the CAC, everything was done for me as part of a court case. And so really being able to say, like, I'm going to choose to take the microphone this time, and I'm going to be involved in these groups by my own choosing. I'm away at college, away from my hometown, doing plenty of other things, but I also want to have this as part of my life because I really feel like I could give someone else hope. And so I kind of, that's really where the shifting happened, was in college of like, I don't really want to talk a ton about the details. Like I will talk about kind of, or if someone comes up to me, I will give a little more detail, but I really want to just be that beacon of light and hope for someone else because I know what it was like to have like Angela Rose from PAVE and even you, Chessy. You know, I had hit a crossroads of my journey at the time where I was really, I had stepped into the advocacy realm. I was working in the field, but also going through some other things as a survivor, remembering the abuse from my earlier childhood. And like hearing your story really ignited something in me to kind of keep going on the journey of telling my story and being there for other survivors. And so really having people pave the way before me and then embracing parts of that worked for me and my journey and then kind of paving the way for others as well. So it was kind of like a threefold thing. So walking alongside others, walking kind of under people who would pave the way before me and then paving the way for other people, for other survivors to find their voices, igniting voices alongside mine, being part of different awareness events on my college campus, and then going from being a participant to a speaker to leading the events. You know, it kind of was a trajectory that I took. And then I was going to school for sociology and criminal justice. And so I was in classes, like criminology classes, and really starting to learn about trauma overall. And a lot of things started to click of like, oh, my journey makes total sense. So even some of the parts that I wasn't sure why it happened that way or why I was feeling that way or why I did that, or, you know, it all started to kind of come full circle. And I really was able to kind of turn my pain to purpose and flip the switch of like, it's yes, it's about my story, but it's going to go beyond that because I really feel a passion. And not every survivor has a passion to turn their pain into purpose and use it in a vocal setting, in a public way. And I love, there's a quote by Nicole Braddock Bromley, who is one of the survivors that I leaned on early on in my journey. She had written a couple books about her experience. And she said, not everyone is called to a platform, but we are called to use our voice. And so whatever that looks like for you, survivors out there, or just humans, I think, and Katie has posted something really cool on Instagram today too, about just, sometimes those rooms that we want to find our voices in can feel too big. And I just want to encourage survivors out there that your voice has value in any room that you walk into. And it could be big or small, whatever works for you. And so, so it really was a trajectory of going beyond the details of my story, gathering hope and healing along the way, and being able to pour that back out, to share with others.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it really is beautiful, and how you built that community and continue to use your voice in so many different ways. Now, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking that there's probably people listening to this episode that are parents or educators or just people who want to support the survivors in their lives. And so I'm just wondering if you have any advice for them, like whether it's a parent of a young child who went through this, like how did the other adults, you spoke about your legal team and the Child Advocacy Center, but other adults in your life when you were still in that like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, like how did they support you? What would you recommend for adults who are dealing with young people going through this to help a young person cultivate that voice and find themselves again and get back into things that brought them joy? Were there any other people along your path that helped you, and how as parents or just adults working with young people, how can we do that?
Yeah, there were many along the way, especially in a school setting, because that's where, I was away from home, right? I was at school. I was dealing with really intense, like, PTSD in my 7th and 8th grade classrooms. They would come in and do like health classes about these topics. And so I really started to lean on my teachers and the guidance team, throughout those years. It did take a while for me to kind of open up to them and really let them in. But once I did, the biggest thing that they did for me is I've learned later what it's called. I didn't know this at the time, but it was compassionate listening. And so they didn't try to fix it. They didn't go like all up in arms about, oh my gosh, that happened to. There was a level of compassion and a level of listening. And they let me linger. I guess that's like my own term. Like they let me linger in their offices, in their spaces, in their classrooms, sometimes after school, sometimes in the middle of the day. They just gave me their time, and they let me kind of take the reins. And so, I was able to have, in New Hampshire, they call it like handle with care. And so basically the teachers and the guidance counselors were in communication with each other. So I think communication is key. If you are part of a team that's dealing with a child or adolescent who's gone through this, kind of forming that mini MDT, that multidisciplinary team that the CAC has within a school setting, or within, even if it's within parents, or like a neighborhood or friend, whatever kind of group that that is dealing with this, I would say just kind of forming that dream team, whatever that looks like, whoever that entails. And so what that looked like was having, kind of safety plans. Like if this happened, they were ready to let me, I had like a permanent pass to guidance that no one knew about but the guidance counselors and the teachers. And all I had to do was like hold up the card and I could leave the classroom and go right down to guidance. But none of my peers knew like that was something that I had. Or, when there was a topic that was difficult in health class, like I could, you know, say a word and they would know what that meant, and I could just go back to down to guidance. And my guidance counselor that was assigned to me that year, she was she was actually an amazing support. She actually kind of wiped her day clean, got child care for her kids, and came and sat next to me during trial. And so, it's just those little things that are the big things showing up. I know that being able to have like teachers at some of my sports games, like when I did go to high school and kind of found my way again, and just really kind of going the extra mile. Where like I saw that they were showing up for me. And even again, these are like my personal examples. But the law enforcement agency that the detective that was on my case, like him and his family um, had a scholarship in his brother's name, and they gave it to me one year, and they hosted like a dinner for me, and my whole team came together to celebrate that. So my victim advocate was there, and her kids and her family and her husband. And so again, it's not everywhere that you can do this, and it looks different for every survivor and every person, but there's just many creative ways that you can kind of take that extra step, just to let a survivor and their family know that you're with them, beyond like what you have to be with them through. Because it was obviously the support during the trial and during the trenches of the case was everything, but those little extra things that were done by teachers, or like my math teacher, I was failing math for like 3 semesters in a row through all of this. And she would write little encouraging notes on my 20% math test that I failed, and would say, "You're going to be okay." Just like little notes, even though I failed her test and like was not doing well, like she would just write little notes like, "It's going to be okay." Like, on to the next one. Like she would just let me know that she was on my team, and that she saw me and heard me and was there with me, even if I was failing her class. And just being able to have that. And my dream team ended up coming to my college graduation party too, which was really, really powerful. My mom surprised me with a whole table full of them there. And just being able to, even like years down the road, this is the last thing that I'll say on this question, but even years down the road. So obviously, in the professional setting, you can't really contact the survivor that you've worked with. That's not appropriate. But I reached out to some of the teachers, and I stayed in contact. I'm a connector. So once you're in my life, you're kind of in it for the long haul. But I had stayed connected to like teachers and guidance counselors and therapists that I had through everything over the 10-year period. And, they would be excited to hear where my life had gone when I was doing well. So it wasn't just about things that I had struggled with. It was like, hey, like I'm, now even I like will let them know when I'm doing like a podcast or if I'm doing a speaking thing, and they're genuinely excited to get that email. And they'll let me know and like be able to say they're proud of me, and just little things along the way. And they don't have to always be as big as a scholarship, right? But they can be just a word of encouragement, being able to sit at a table with someone years down the road and say like, wow, look at the journey that you've been on. It's an honor to hear where you are now. And so I think I would say those things are the biggest things for me.
Just reminds me of like the power of community. I also kept thinking of that Mr. Rogers quote of look for the helpers. I'm probably butchering it a little bit, but there's always helpers, right? Like there's always people out there. I think sometimes it's easy to just get a bit down, especially with the current state of the world, but to remember that there are people who really care, and there are those helpers out there. And for those of us who want to just help, to remember that it doesn't always have to be a big thing. Sometimes it's just, like you said, Mel, just like showing up and being there and listening,
Yeah, or even just a note of encouragement via email. Oftentimes the little things were the biggest things for me on the journey.
Yeah, that's such a great reminder, too, for anybody and everybody, and especially for somebody like me who tends to cocoon myself away from other people when I'm feeling overwhelmed or anxious, or that's sort of my default state. So it's a great reminder to continue reaching out. And I always remember that I feel so much better after I've reached out to the people that are in my life or in my corner, whether it's been weeks, months, or years since we last spoke. So that is a really wonderful reminder to keep checking in with people. People love to hear how you're doing, what you're up to. And it also feels really good for people to ask and to be curious about that, especially when they've played such a big role in your life.
One thing I was just going to add into, I've worked with like hundreds of survivors, and I love when I get to hear from them. Like there's some clients that text me often, right? And I love getting, because same thing like you said, Mel, I don't reach out to them because I don't ever want to trigger them or, remind them of something that happened when they're maybe like in a good headspace and not thinking about it. But when they reach out to me and say like, hey, I graduated from college, or hey, I'm doing this, like I love it. It means so much to me. So reach out to those people because they definitely want to hear from you, and it's so meaningful.
Oh, I love that. I love hearing that from a professional, and Mel, hearing that from you as well as, a survivor and professional is especially cool, since you've got both perspectives. But, a lot of what we talk about as survivors and as advocates is that just because, and so this is something that I struggle with sometimes, is that just because you've experienced this one big, horrible, traumatic, bad thing doesn't mean you're kind of scot-free for the rest of your life, which is a lesson that I feel like can be really, really tough, because so much of healing from a sexual assault takes the rest of your life, so that when other traumas come up, it can feel super overwhelming, but also can feel like an opportunity for even more growth and even more strength, in, as you said before, the aftermath of any traumas. So, and about 8 years ago, I know you experienced a life-changing accident that really started or broke open a new chapter in your healing journey. Would you be able to share with us, as much as you're comfortable sharing, how that secondary trauma brought you face to face with the physical toll of trauma, and how you grew onwards from that?
Yeah, and that is one of the pieces of my story that is really, really powerful for me to tell at this point in time in my life, just because it was completely unexpected. And I thought, I had gone years down the road. I had healed so much. I had been working in the field. I had moved from New Hampshire to Cape Cod, Massachusetts to pursue my career at a child advocacy center. I had graduated college and worked for 2 years at a crisis center as an advocate, doing all of the things, working in courthouses, hospitals, overnight shelters, and then had moved here for my dream job to work full circle at a child advocacy center as first a family advocate. And then I went on to be trained as a forensic interviewer. And in the midst of my dream coming true, and really being in a great place with my healing, and have started speaking across the country about my experiences more in a professional way, and started getting like speaking engagements and being able to be on many different stages. I was in, and I'm going to drop this kind of lightly, kind of trigger warning, I guess. I was in a plane crash, and I know that that's been something that's been on the news lately, and it's a place of fear for a lot of people. So I will say that with kind of a trigger warning, but I was in a small, it was supposed to be a very fun thing here on Cape Cod. People do that. It's like kind of a thing, I guess. I did not know that, but when I moved here, like I started, we have like a small airport here that has a lot of like personal private planes that come in and out. There's a lot of people like in different demographics that have planes, and they come in just for vacation on Cape Cod and then they leave. And so I knew someone that had a plane, and I'm not going to get into too much of the nitty gritty of that day and what happened, but after the plane crash, obviously I walked away from it, but I did have some injuries, and my injuries were kind of close to abdominal area, from the seatbelt, from having the seatbelt on. I had a giant bruise, a bad one, from like my belly button to my back. And I started to have like follow-ups for that injury, because they were looking at broken ribs, and then they were looking at like deeper injuries, making sure my stomach was okay. And then deeper than that, other organs were okay. And so in the process of that, there had been one piece of my healing journey that I had not faced. And even speaking across the country, sharing my story, I had shared pretty much my story in detail in all different arenas and all different places and different parts of it, and was very comfortable doing that at that point. There was one piece of the journey that I knew, in real time had happened when I was 12. There was a moment of pain during my sexual assault that I remember that was very clear. Most of my sexual assault I spent kind of in the trees above me, dissociating. But there was a moment of pain that I actually physically and cognitively remember. And which is where I believe this internal injury had happened. And, but I swore I would never, again, at 12, I didn't know what to call that. I wouldn't really explore that until I was like 15, 14, 15, or even maybe a little younger than that, trying to use tampons for the first time, getting my first period, all of those things. And then I had such a struggle with that. There was so much physical pain when I would try to do a normal thing like use a tampon that I just like avoided it. And I told my best friend who had gone through it with me at the time. She didn't have an issue with that, and she tried to like pep talk me outside the bathroom and all of these things, but there was an actual physical thing going on inside my body that no pep talk could unravel. And so I lived for basically 15 years with this pain inside my body, knowing that something was very wrong, but not knowing how to even go about healing from it, especially even as a professional and even as a young woman now in my 20s. I had not heard anybody, even survivors, talking about the physical ramifications of sexual abuse and sexual trauma. I had heard some things maybe in my classes very briefly, but nothing specific to what I had been navigating. And so it just got pushed further and further down. But then this plane crash happened, and I was really focusing on this abdominal injury that I had had. And so I had like a pre-surgical consult to see if they had, and it was really a miracle that nothing, my organs were kind of untouched. And I have a pretty strong faith. And there were things that happened as we were crashing that really made me confident that I was kind of held and protected in that way. So then as this health journey is unraveling, I'm trying to kind of, I really wanted to face this health issue head on. I really knew that there was something underlying that I hadn't faced for years and knew how it impacted me. So I was like going to every appointment. Like I wanted to make sure that everything was okay with my body. And it was the first time that I wanted that, like that I wasn't afraid to do that. And so thankfully I got connected with a really amazing primary care doctor, just kind of by happenstance, I guess, maybe not, but through a coworker at the time. She had had some like other kind of GYN, other types of issues like that. And she's like, she's great. She might be great, for what you're going through with your injuries. And so I started seeing her just for my plane crash injuries. But then we were kind of wrapping up that chapter. Everything ended up being okay. My bruise had faded. And at my last appointment, I just got this like burst of courage, I guess I'll call it, to say like something else is going on and I'd love for you to take a look at it. Like, I don't know what to even call it. Like, I'm just going to tell you. And at that point, like, I was okay with telling my doctors like my history of sexual abuse and trauma. So I did tell her. She already knew that I had a history, but I hadn't told her like there's something that's wrong. And I think I know exactly when it happened. And so I just like said it, and I was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, is she going to be shocked? Is she going to be like, you're crazy? Or is she going to be like, why are you just telling me this now? Like, but she met me, she got on my level, which is one of the biggest things. I'm a facilitator with I Have the Right To, and we're doing some training for medical students next week. This is one of the biggest things that, like, when you're meeting a survivor in a medical setting, get on their level, because this was so profound for me. I didn't feel like she was talking over me or that she was like going to prescribe something onto me that was not my story. She just sat with me and said, tell me more about, what you've been feeling, what you've been struggling with. Where is the impossibility so we can work on making it possible? And so at that time, I was not in an intimate relationship. I actually, because of this injury, because I knew something was so wrong, that was part of the manifestation of like, don't come near me if you want an intimate relationship because I don't know what's wrong with my body. And so I had a lot of fear throughout college about that as I was starting to pursue relationships, even just a little bit. And so we ended up going through this process of, I'll call it like a progression exam. So I had not at that point gone to like the gynecologist. I was terrified. I had gone once when I was 17 and swore I'd never go back because of how traumatic it was. Because I had this actual thing in my body that made it excruciatingly painful. Like I put my feet in the stirrups and I had a complete panic attack at 17. They like had to take my keys. I wasn't allowed to leave. And then swore I'd never kind of touch that with a 10-foot pole until this accident. And so she was amazing. She said, well, how about next week? You come in next week and I'll just have you sit on the table and we'll talk a little bit more. Cause I was like, I want to know how my body is doing. I have a desire to like, have my brain and body work together for good, and to be empowered to take care of myself as a healthy woman. And I want to know that everything's good, but I just don't know how to get through the fear and the physical pain that I was dealing with even with any type of like insertion, really. I just couldn't. The physical pain was so excruciating. Like I would like get sick or like almost pass out, even with any attempt of inserting like a tampon or anything like that. And so really being able to have this provider that was kind of on my level and was like, whatever it takes, we'll walk this together. She didn't give me like an absolute outcome. So it didn't feel overwhelming. It just felt like we're going to do the next step and see what happens and see how your body responds. And so sitting on the table with my feet in the stirrups is all we did that first appointment. And we just talked and she didn't touch me. We didn't do anything. The next week we met like once every week or couple weeks for a little while. And then the next appointment was, she was going to actually like attempt an exam. And so we did that, but she told me every step of the way, I'm going to put my hand on your leg. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And that was super powerful. And then we eventually got to the actual completing an exam. And she was able to tell me exactly what had been going on in my body for 15 years. And she had a place to send me for a referral for pelvic floor physical therapy. And I was really able, and this was like I had healed so much from all the kind of like flashbacks and navigating all the memories. And like, I felt like in a really good place, but this physical piece was becoming something that was really impacting my life as I had, become an adult and was really wanted healthy relationships, wanted to feel empowered as a woman. For many years, I felt like my body had not caught up with my mind as a survivor of trauma, and that I like couldn't pursue an intimate relationship because like I just couldn't even go there. And so being able to have this provider walk with me every step of the way, and I bawled my eyes out when I had a successful like woman exam, pap smear, all the things that everyone does not enjoy. I was so happy because for years I just like couldn't even fathom that being a thing. And again, it was not easy. Like it took, like I was getting sick, I was getting nausea, I had a vasovagal response, which is when your kind of blood pressure skyrockets and drops. And it was my body like living out the trauma that had been held in my pelvic region for 15 years, and it made it impossible for insertion. She validated like, yeah, it's actually not anything you could do to talk yourself out of it. Like you physically can't have insertion right now of any kind. Like it was kind of a wall. And I was diagnosed with a condition called vaginismus, which is basically that. They often call it the wall. And so your body responds to, it's not just trauma survivors, but it is a high number of trauma survivors will end up with a condition like this or navigating something pelvic floor related. And so I had pelvic floor dysfunction, pelvic pain and vaginismus, which is a form of pelvic floor dysfunction. And so I was referred to a pelvic floor physical therapist and treated for a couple years. And I say that not to scare survivors or anyone. Everyone's treatment looks different depending on how your body responds. But that healing process for the over 2 years that I was in it was absolutely monumental to my healing. It took a lot of courage and a lot of grit and grace, is what I say, to navigate it. But with the support of another circle of kind of dream team that I held close to me and created. It often consisted of women that are in the same faith as me that could be praying for me during my appointments. Some other strong, amazing women in my life. Actually, your mom, Chessy, was really encouraging to me. Angela, you were as well. And just rallying women around me for that journey that was very intimate, to be able to share honestly what it was like, because it wasn't pretty. It was, me getting sick. And like I had a friend who her house was near where I went to treatment. So similar to what those teachers did for me long ago. I had friends that came and said like, hey, if you can't drive all the way home, come to my house and take a nap on my couch and I'll make you a turkey sandwich. And like, again, little things, but they were so like, I tear up thinking about it because that turkey sandwich was everything, and then having a group of women, like so many showed up for me. When I completed my treatment, I had like a end of treatment party for myself. And I gathered all the women who had been praying for me and on my journey, other survivors and other women in my church and people who had been there, like in the different corners of the world praying for me. And we had like a celebration on the beach, and it was incredibly powerful. And just being able to celebrate with them and with my providers. My providers did the same thing that my advocates did early on, is just like celebrating my wins and my victories, and like something, because they took the time, that I wasn't just a number to them. I wasn't just another patient they had to get in and out, which I feel like is what happens a lot in medical settings, especially with like well woman exams. It's like, oh, it's just another exam. I do these all day. But for a survivor like me who had an actual physical issue that like made me sick and was like impossible, I needed a little extra care, kind of like that handle with care idea from long ago. And so really being able to get that was super empowering to me, but really being able to face that piece restored so much back to me that I thought I'd never have. And, really gave me what I prayed for long ago. Because of that healing journey that I was able to go on, I was able to enter into a intimate relationship with my now husband. I thought my dream of having kids was out the window, because if I couldn't have any insertion, that's kind of impossible in the way that I wanted it. I mean, there's other ways, but I wanted to have a natural pregnancy and childbirth and all of the above. And I'm still kind of in awe because the pain was for so long. I'm still kind of in awe when I look back and say, like, I'm almost 2 years into that miracle coming true. I had my daughter almost 2 years ago now. I got married in 2022, and it's been a really full circle journey of restoration and healing, and really being able to face hard things. And it was not easy or linear, but it was worth it.
That's so beautiful, Mel. And it's so important, too, to talk about the physical issues that I feel like are so taboo. I've learned so much about my own body from just talking with my friends from high school and then into college about, different things that are going on. And, oh, yeah, that's not normal, or that is normal. Because I feel like so much of women's healthcare is kept quiet. And I do think you make an incredible point. It's so important to, as a survivor or anybody who wants to be handled with care, is finding a health provider who is trauma informed and informing them that, you might need to take a couple steps. I did the same thing when I started having to do, women wellness exams, and it took me a while to feel comfortable to actually do the physical exams, but it's so important and integral to our long-term health to get that done. It's really important to find the right partners who can face those tough things with you. And so thank you for sharing your story about your experience with that.
And it's so important, I think, for professionals to know. I really am a firm believer that any profession going that's going to be in a medical setting, or also lawyers, I think that they should all be required to take trauma-informed practice classes throughout their studies. I really firmly believe that. I think that a lot of people don't understand when they think of sexual assault, they think of the act of sexual assault. Maybe some people think of, okay, going through the justice system after that, but they don't think about that ongoing toll on survivors, whether it's actually like a physical condition like you, Mel, or just the trauma associated with whatever that is, right? Like people who have it associated with a particular place or a smell, and of course, the thought of being touched. I know that when I represented survivors in New York, there was a statute of limitations window that opened up that allowed people that had claims outside the window to finally bring them. So the first time in my career, I was representing people who were like 60, 70, 80 years old. And I have to tell you, there were many who told me they had never gone to a doctor, And this is mostly male clients, actually, that I'm thinking about, who just never went because they said the thought of somebody touching me made me want to leap out of my own skin. And so they just never went. And some of them who never had intimate relationships ever in their lives. They never had an intimate relationship. They're 70, 80 years old because of this. And I think had they had a PCP, had they had somebody who handled them with care, how different could their life have been? And Mel, I know next week you're going to go out with I Have the Right To and talk with future medical students or nurses, etc. And you're going to talk to them about what you think that those professionals need to know. What are some of the things you're going to share with them that you think that everyone should know?
One of the biggest things, I had said it, but I'll reiterate it, is getting on the person or survivor's level. I think kind of that overarching fear is someone like standing over you, right? Because that might be a part of a lot of survivor stories, that someone was over them, powerful over them. And so I really want to encourage medical professionals to do what mine did, is to get on my level. They sat at the same physical level that I was. So if I was up on the table, she was raising her chair up. If I was low because she had just let the table down, she was lowering her chair to meet me where I was at. I mean, I think that's just a beautiful symbol of like, I'm meeting you where you're at. And you can do that in other ways as well. Some of the other things is the communication. So making it clear, it may be, especially as like a medical professional, it may be like, I can almost say positively that it's just something you do every day, all day, but like every single step. So I'm moving your leg. I am picking this up. It might be cold. Really being very clear. It might sound silly for someone who's been doing it forever, to say every step of the way, but that can speak volumes to a survivor that you're saying, or someone who's even struggling with the exam for other reasons, or asking the question, is that okay? I'm going to move your leg. Is that okay? Or what can I do to make you more comfortable? Kind of leaving it open-ended, asking questions, inviting the person or survivor into the process. So can you hold this here for me? Because that helped me to stay connected to my body through the process, because if I was just letting her do everything without her communicating or talking to me, or like I would have traveled somewhere else. And I did for like some of those early appointments. And so we were really trying to find ways for me to stay present in the process. In addition to the pace. Medical settings are often very rushed pace. And so if there is, obviously it can't every time be a 2-hour appointment. Like that's just not realistic, especially with there's other patients to be seen. But other ways to kind of navigate that is maybe not shoving so much into one appointment. So like she had more frequent appointments with me, but they were shorter appointments. So like she could meet her other patients after me, but like there were days where she would block out an hour or two for my appointment, not every week. But then other days she would just do like, oh, we're just going to sit on the table in the stirrups, and that appointment's going to be 15 minutes. So it kind of balanced out in her scheduling of appointments of like getting creative, I guess, is one of my biggest words of advice is getting creative and not just doing it by the book because you've always done it that way by the book. Again, there's obviously things I've been on the provider end of things as an advocate. So there are things that you have to follow or do, whether it's appointment times or duration or all those things, but get creative. There's ways to be able to look at what you have to tackle that week with the survivor, or what the goal is, right? And then look at, okay, how long do we need for that? Okay, we might need to break that into 2 shorter appointments, or not just going with, oh, this is a half hour every time they come, no matter what. And so I think that's one of the biggest things. And just open communication, validation, and celebration, I would say, are 2 things that were really crucial to me on the journey, that it wasn't just like, you're just another number, get out. We're not celebrating. I got high fives when I would complete an exam. Like, she would bring me like a little token of courage, like a little heartstone, or like, again, it doesn't have to be in the form of gifts or anything. Again, that has to depend on your practice and what you're able to do. But again, get creative, get out of the box, and be able to bring that little thing that might be a huge thing for survivors. Like, I think we often doubt ourselves. I can speak from like the provider side, like with all this person's going through, this one small thing is not going to make a difference because they're going through so much. And like, what is my little token going to do for this big mountain that they're facing? But some of those smallest tokens meant the most to me. And so don't shy away from those things and get creative in ways that you can let the survivor know that you hear them, you validate them, you celebrate the mountains that they're climbing, even if it's something as simple as a well woman exam that people do all the time with no problem. That could be something that is a giant mountain for a survivor. I know it was for me. So being able to help them conquer those mountains with grace and compassion and availability and meeting them where they're at, because I know that my providers did that for me, and I'm sitting where I am today on the other side, living a beautiful life after trauma because of those people that made a choice to do it that way.
I love it whenever providers enter into an appointment with that perspective, even if somebody isn't a survivor, right? Because a lot of times survivors aren't going to feel comfortable disclosing right away. And so an example is I took my son for his appointment recently, and they ask consent, right, to touch him. They ask consent before they examine his body. They explain, like, no one should do this if your parents aren't in the room. Everybody should ask for your consent. And I really love that because, one, I have those conversations with my kids at home, but two, it's just putting that perspective, because then if there was something, they would feel more comfortable telling the provider. So maybe even just like going into it as if everybody has dealt with some level of trauma and then like navigating it in that way instead of assuming that there is no trauma. Maybe we should flip it a bit.
That's really good. Yeah, I love that.
So Mel, for the survivors that might be listening today and who might be feeling isolated, what's one thing that you want them to hear from you today?
I want you to know that you're not alone, even if you feel alone. I think there's so many of us out there that, like Chessy said earlier, like that just like retreat, right? When things are too overwhelming, the phone becomes really heavy to reach out to someone. I know even with, I've talked a lot about like my ability to reach out, but there were many times where I retreated and, really struggled with that reaching out, or just wish that someone would reach out to me, or any of the things that we navigate as survivors. But I just want you to know that you are not alone, even if you feel alone, that there are people out there that are walking before you, walking beside you, and walking behind you, that you're covered, that you're believed and supported, especially from this community, from I Have the Right To. You can reach out to anyone here, or if reaching out is just too heavy, I want you to have a deep knowing that you are not alone, that you are valued, that your voice has value, even if you don't speak much, that your story has value, even if your story's not out there, that everything that you keep close or anything that you share out loud has value, that you as a person have value and you are not forgotten in this. I know it can be overwhelming for survivors who aren't vocal or aren't speaking about what's happening to them, that they can feel kind of forgotten in the movement or in spaces like this where, well, that's great for them. They can talk about it, but I'm over here, like, I can only listen. That we hear you, we support you, how we validate you, and we celebrate with you every small or big win that you have on your journey, even if no one knows about it. So we stand with you in solidarity, in victory, and um, we will keep paving the way for you and with you and alongside you.
I got chills when you said that. I hope that people rewind that and listen to it a few times, because I think a lot of people need that reminder right now. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for being with us today. Your honesty, your strength, and your heart. Thank you for sharing that. Hearing your story and the way you've woven your lived experience into your advocacy and your work is really, truly inspiring.
Thank you so much, Mel. I'm so proud to call you a friend. You remind us all that healing and finding your voice is not in a straight line, and that all of our voices and our experiences matter, no matter where we are in our journey. Thank you for showing up with so much authenticity and courage today.
And to our listeners, thank you for being here with us. If Melanie's story resonated with you, please remember you are not alone. Healing is possible, support is out there, and your voice matters. Be sure to follow I Have the Right To on social media and check the episode notes for links to survivor resources and ways to get involved. Until next time, keep showing up with empathy, curiosity, and care for yourself and others. And thanks for listening to Aspire.